Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Giant Strength Podcast. I am your host, Paul Sterrett. This show is for coaches and people like yourself that want to hear from influencers in our industry. If you're an aspiring strength coach or a coach looking to pick up a few extra tools for your toolbox, this will be the podcast for you. Here we will talk to industry leaders from the professional, collegiate, high school, and private sector settings. You will experience roundtable discussions, co-hosts, as well as guest hosts. Everyone will share their experiences, knowledge, and challenges over various topics in the strength and conditioning world. If you want to talk shop or learn more about what we are up to in between episodes, follow the Iron Giant Strength Podcast on Twitter @StrengthGiants. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Iron Giant Strength Podcast as we continue our conversation talking with coaches around the country about that transition from summer program into the fall semester. Really happy today to have Coach Dan Mullins, the head strength and conditioning coach and the linebackers coach from Logansville High School down in Loganville, Georgia. Coach, I appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Coach.
Absolutely, man. Well, let's dive right into it. Before we get to that transition period, talk about your summer program, if you could, how you guys structured it, what you guys did, if you could do so.
Absolutely. So we've got guys typically about 4 days a week within the summer. We go Monday through Thursday, but something a little bit different about where I am here. Wednesdays is actually a county passing league. So every Wednesday night, all the schools in the county get together and have 7-on-7. So realistically, we're only training Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So we structure that a little bit differently. And we keep it almost like it's in season from a structure standpoint, but more of obviously our volume intensities are a little bit different than what we would do in season. But we're really prepping that phase. So by the time we get to our summer, our focus is really on our sprinting, getting guys faster, and kind of making sure we've got, from a technique standpoint, we've got all of our exercises that we're going to use in season nailed down and taught and drilled, so that way we're perfecting those. Obviously, we're still building strength, we're still building power, but our focus is making sure we're healthy, we're fast, and we're ready to go for when we get time to it. So as far as our program goes, we typically have about 100 kids, anywhere from 90 to 110. We'll float anywhere between there based off baseball and AAU basketball and vacations and all that stuff. We don't technically tell them, it's mandatory, but at the end of the day, like, playing time's not mandatory either. So our guys know that if they're there, it's going to make them better and it's going to get them more prepared. So we have about an hour and 45 minutes of our focus on building. So how we structure it, everybody warms up together. And I'm lucky enough to where our practice fields for football are right outside our field house. So our guys can transition through our locker room and straight outside. So we split our groups up. Juniors and seniors start outside, and they do all of our sprint work first, and our plyometrics, whatever our focus is on the day. And then inside is freshmen, sophomores, they'll lift, and then we'll switch. And then we all come together real quick before football starts, and we have a group mobility session, which lasts about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the day. So I get about an hour and 45 minutes with them before we have about 45 minutes of football.
That's great. Yeah, that's good. What do you contribute the buy-in? I mean, that sounds like pretty good numbers that you guys have coming in. What do you contribute that buy-in to?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with our head football coach. He's a big believer in the weight room. He was a weight room guy at University of Georgia before he started his high school career. So he obviously is heavily bought into the weight room and the process of what's being built there. But he has a firm belief that this summer was all about development. So he preached that early on, back when we were in spring football and we were transitioning from spring to summer. That was a big part of our message, was that it's not mandatory, but again, I know I said it neither is playing time. So our focus was less on scheme with our guys. Even when we got into the football stuff, it was less about scheme and more about development of what they need in order to be successful. So he bought that in early on, and really got kids feeding off of his energy. We've got a young staff that builds great relationships, even from the position groups standpoint. All of our position coaches really do a great job of building that buy-in with kids. And, we have a great culture here. Our kids, man, we got to run them out of here at the end of the day. They're upstairs in the team room playing PlayStation for 3 hours after. So
talk about the communication, the importance of that communication. I know you're on staff there, but talk about the importance of the communication with the head coach as far as what you're doing with the guys or with the athletes in the weight room. Just talk about that if you can real quick.
For sure. So I have a plan that's typically laid out usually 2 to 3 weeks in advance, and every cycle I show it to him, and he's on board. He's fully supportive of what we're doing. My approach is a little bit different than what they've had in the past. In the past, it's been all about strength, 100% all the time. And don't get me wrong, we're gonna push some heavy weight around. We're gonna throw some things around, but my goal is to make them the best football players they can be. So we do that focus on mobility is new to them. So we've got some things that we need to loosen up from a movement perspective, which is the implementation of that movement or that mobility segment has been huge on, and it's really worked to help get guys to where they need to be. And he bought in 100% on that. And that was a conversation we had when I first came on board after I started watching the guys lift and train. And I was like, we've got some great talent, but we got to get them more limber. We got to get them more mobile so that they can do what we're going to ask them to do. So he 100% bought onto that. And, I think from a communication aspect, being able to communicate where we are and what we need to work on to create his vision. Obviously from a vision perspective, it has to be led by the head coach, and he's got a fantastic vision for what this team can do. And my job is to put that into reality. So we have that conversation weekly as far as like what we're actually doing that week, but he knows the program goals at a 2 to 3 to 4 week basis. And then every day pre-practice before we start lift, all of our position coaches are here. We meet for about 10 minutes before I go and meet with our guys and tell them what we're rolling out that day, so that they have a clear vision. They know what's going on. They know what to coach throughout the day. So throughout each session, and that way they're involved too. So our kids know that, our assistant coaches are in it with them. They're here every hour that we ask them to be here. So that, again, that creates that buy-in aspect where kids don't think it's just myself and our head coach running it. It's every coach that's on staff is about their development and believes in them.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about summer's winding down. What's the shoot in Georgia? I know you guys are getting ready to start actual classes here, I believe, next week.
Yes,
talk about what does the fall semester look like for you? What are you working with, and how do you structure what you have with your guys?
So yeah, Georgia, it was actually one of the main reasons I moved from Cincinnati down here was the idea that we have strength and conditioning in the school day, which was kind of a foreign aspect to me, but it allowed me to get heavily involved and do what I love to do all day, every day. So I'll be in the weight room all day. So how it's structured, and our administration team here and has really put a great plan in place for what's going on. I primarily only work with football. I get a couple basketball guys, a couple wrestling guys here and there throughout the day, but we're on block schedule. So I have all my guys for 95 minutes. So by the time transition happens, because they do have to get from the school to the field house, it's usually about 90 minutes to get dressed, warmed up, get everything in. But I also see them every day, which is a little bit different from most schools that are on blocks. Usually it's every other day. I get them every single day for 95 minutes, which is fantastic. I have plenty of time. But as we start to transition, we do start this coming Tuesday. So one thing that is really going to help us out is the addition of RAC Coach and our ability to organize everything together. So I have classes. My smallest class is 45. My biggest class is 52. And I have really 16 racks, but 8 functioning racks is what I built them into. And that gives us all of our tier system ready to work through. And we can do a 6-man rotation and really utilize our 8 full racks or 8 double racks that we have. And it's going to allow us to flow very efficiently and keep things going, so that way we can save time instead of movement, so that way I don't have to prioritize a weights day versus speed day or anything like that as we move through the season. I really have the time and the management to be able to do a full weights session and still get mobility, still get plyos in, and not have to prioritize again, because I'm fortunate enough to be in a situation where I have time.
Yeah.
It's a valuable resource. So
sure. How are those classes or block classes broken up? So you mentioned you got players coming in all day. Do you have, block one, is it freshmen? Is it broken up like that? How are those blocks broken up with your guys?
Yes, sir. So block one it's called athletic health. So 3 days a week we're in the weight room, 2 days a week we're in the classroom, and I teach health to them. Those 3 days a week with freshmen is same structure, 95 minutes a day. And I think that class is my 44. So that's a smaller class comparatively with PE and health. It's a pretty small class of freshmen. So that class, though, is a little bit more mixed. I think only 12 of those are football players. I've got a couple baseball players, a couple basketball, a couple wrestlers as well. So those are just athletes only. So we'll be structured by rack. So 2 racks will be football, maybe 3, depending on how many guys we end up getting. Baseball guys will be divvied up into their own racks. And for the most part, those first 2-3 weeks, I got to learn what the guys I haven't been working with all summer, what they can do. So our football guys, they'll know their routine. They'll be able to pump through. They know how to read our sheets and everything like that. So they're almost, I don't want to say autonomous, but they can definitely work more efficiently than those guys that I don't know. So my first 2-3 weeks, I'll be learning what those guys can do and really working heavily with those guys. Simple things like making sure their movement patterns are good and teaching what I need to do before we start touching everything. So junior high, I know they have been lifting. They have a junior high weights class. It's only, I think it's 35 minutes each day. So I know they've been doing something. But I have to make sure, obviously they're doing it right before we jump in and throw them in. So that's my freshman class. Blocks 2 and block 3 are varsity football. So it's sophomores through seniors, and they're split right down the middle. So I've got 47 in one, and I think it's 49 in the second. So we've got a good number. There's a couple other athletes in there as well that aren't football players only, but they're all athletes. So those guys will be all in their racks by themselves, so that I can, again, make sure I know who I'm watching first.
Yeah.
All our football guys will be grouped together based off total.
That's great. So talk about that first block. You mentioned you have a mixture of, it's an athletic period, so you have a mixture of a lot of different athletes. Question I hear a lot from coaches, how do you exactly, if you don't mind diving in a little bit more in detail, how do you structure that? Because question I get a lot from coaches is like, man, I don't know. I have confusion with that transition, when I'm working with kids all summer, then here comes a whole nother load of kids that have not been there all summer. Maybe some things to think about. How do you approach that? Talk about that a little bit more, if you don't mind.
It really starts a couple weeks out from school, making sure that I identify some of those freshman leaders within the football program and with any sports that I'm working with. Making sure that those leaders know that they're an extension of me, so that they can work to really organize themselves. Obviously, they're not by themselves. I'm still watching them closely, but those guys are the guys that are in charge in racks. So making sure that when I divvy up the racks of who's where, I know that one of my leaders is with each of those racks. So that way, I know it runs smoothly. I know guys are safe because we teach spotting very early. So that way, I know everybody's safe when we're lifting and everybody's moving efficiently, so that I can focus less on those things, but focus more on the technique and actually coaching our guys up. So I do like to divvy them up by sport based off their rack. Some guys that just kind of that mix them together and create the best racks possible to push each other. I think from a management aspect, it's a little bit easier for me to separate racks by sport. So in a couple of the other experiences that I've had where I've trained, that's what I've done. So that way I know, okay, racks 1 and 2 are my football guys, racks 3 and 4 are girls soccer, racks 5 and 6 are basketball, and so on. So I post their racks or their workouts for each rack, so that way it's there for them, but it's also there for me, so that as I'm circulating through the room, I look at the rack and, oh, you guys are here, you guys are on your B tier, this is what you should be doing. is what you need to be doing a little bit better here and there. So separating those allow me to kind of tailor that workout to them. Now, for the most part, we do have similar structures. Like Monday's our squat day, Monday's our bench day, but I will tailor their volume and their intensity based off where they are in season. Obviously, taking that full developmental approach, but I found that that's an organizational piece that makes my life a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. That's a good point that you just said there. A lot of the meat and potatoes of the program might be similar for everybody that's in there, but as far as the volume's concerned, that's where you might differ, from in-season, out-of-season athletes. And obviously, tailor it to be maybe a little bit more individualized with, some accessory work and things like that. But as far as, if I heard you right, did you say, the meat and potatoes of what you're doing is going to be fairly similar no matter what rack you're at? Was that right?
Yes, sir. And obviously, we, with a lot of multi-sport athletes that we get, guys have to be able to do multiple things. So you might be a baseball player and that might be your primary sport, but you also run track or you also play basketball. So we do a lot of those similar things. And I'll tailor things similarly, like instead of if we're incline benching with most of our sports, or if we're flat benching for football or whatever it is, I may have our pitchers, you're going to neutral grip incline press.
Yeah.
So that way we're, based off where we're doing. So it's very similar. We try to stay on similar movement patterns, and I'll just tailor the exercise to what I'm trying to get from each one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. Coach, lastly here, talk about, I guess, just your program. If there's anything that you think might be unique with your approach or what you guys do that or might be different than a neighboring school, what might that be? Talk about that, or something that you have found good success with in years past.
Yeah. So when it comes to me, I've got a powerlifting background. I trained West Side for 5 years, competitive powerlifting, and I don't do it nearly as much as I'd like to now with my schedule, but and the move, but I'll be getting back into it. But I think I've had a blessing of learning from Laura Phelps and Shane Sweat, some original West Side people of the system, the ins and outs of the system, and how it applies to athletes, not just powerlifting. So I'm happy to say I'm technically a West Side guy. That doesn't mean that's the only system that we use. We use a lot of different things based off time of year and who I'm working with, but our system's based off of West Side principles, where we're moving lightweight fast. We're going to get accommodating resistance in where we can, so that way we can focus on speed and power development. We are going to push heavyweight. I think a lot of context is misplaced within our conversations on Twitter and things like that. That obviously weight's not the end all be all. We're not going out there and playing football with a bar on our back or soccer with a bar in our hands or anything like that. At the end of the day, like, I'm dealing with 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old boys that love to bench, love to look good when they take their shirts off at the pool in the summer. So like, I'm going to scratch that itch. And, we'll on Fridays before game days, and part of our game day lift is, we hammer guns except for quarterbacks. They do something a little bit different, but, we hammer buys and tries as a tier, so that way, they're feeling good about themselves, because we want to boost self-confidence. And, my purpose and my goal is to teach the why behind everything we do. So I get a 10-minute meeting at the beginning of every summer session and at the beginning of every session in school to tell them why we're doing what we're doing. So that way, when they go on to college and I'm not there, they're not just falling off by the wayside, and they can self-sufficiently program for themselves, or at least have a general idea of what's going on. So when it comes to, when you say, what are we doing differently? I would say that, a lot of people are West Side that aren't West Side guys, look down on West Side thinking we're all about strength and we're just a bunch of meatheads that like to bench every day. But it's a system that we've incorporated that's a little bit different, that I love. Kids have latched onto, and they're definitely seeing the reward from all those and from the work that we're putting in. And then we drive it hard every single day.
Yeah. You said a couple things there that I think is important, talking about communicating with your athletes of what they're doing and why they're doing it. I think the athletes, and sometimes as coaches, we forget this, they have a right to know not only what they're doing, but why they're doing it. How is this going to make them a better football player, basketball player, baseball player, whatever it might be? I think that's great. I just think that creates even that much more buy-in from the athletes. So I think that's great that you mentioned that. And then another thing, well, that's we'll set that aside for another discussion, but I heard you mention you dropped the game day lift. That's such I love that topic. We'll have to have you on another time to talk more in depth about all that stuff. But
Absolutely.
Coach, I can't thank you enough, man. Good stuff today. I can't thank you enough. I know you're busy. I know everybody's busy right now, especially you guys starting school next week. But I really do appreciate your time.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. It's a fun conversation. I always like talking about what we're doing because I feel like it makes me reflective and makes me a better coach. So
absolutely. Everybody, thank you so much for joining again. Sit tight, and we'll be back here soon with another episode of the Iron Giants Strength Podcast.